good logistics, for urgent logistics for various participants, including medical. We definitely believe that will be there. The entertainment industry, it will be there. The VTOL and passenger traffic, it will be there. Inspection, it will be there. So those 5 typologies that you see in this picture, we all believe it will be there. The question is, do we have sufficient airspace to cover this all at the same time, at the same location?
Vries Strookman's fascination with aviation started young. Growing up near a military airbase, he spent hours managing virtual air traffic, playing a game called Kennedy Control. I can relate to this. I had a similar procedural game called Scram that was nuclear power plants. Years later, watching a military helicopter land noisily in the middle of Amsterdam, he had a simple thought. There's got to be a better way to do this. That thought proved prophetic. Through his company, Kennedy Approach, Strookman works at the intersection of government, academia, residents, and industry. He brings hands-on flying experience, holding the full range of drone pilot certifications, alongside a sharp eye for spatial planning, ethics, and the societal questions surrounding new forms of flight. Dual master's degrees in business administration, the University of Amsterdam, and communication science, University of Groningen, give him a rare ability to bridge technology, policy, and the public. From Den Helder to Rotterdam, he leads pilot projects and helps build test and research facilities where emergency services, municipalities, and training institutions collaborate on the future of aviation, translating real-world experience into the broader conversation about how drones and eVTOLs will find their place in our cities. Central to this work is the Urban Skylab, a public-private collaboration that tests new applications, develops policy, and shares knowledge to ensure urban aviation is integrated safely, efficiently, and responsibly. It's where vision, technology, and practice, quite literally, take flight. And I can say very personally and very directly, this totally lights up my brain. Like when I was at the Intertraffic conference and I got to go and visit the maquette, the architectural model that Vries and his colleague built out together, it really made all of this come alive, right? Seeing that sort of 3D, three-dimensional, and all the thought that they put into it was just really fantastic. And ever since, I've wanted to have him on SkyZero. And today, Vries is our guest on the SkyZero.io podcast. Vries, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks for having me.
Take a few minutes and add anything to the bio. Did I miss anything?
Well, I think it's a good interpretation of what my life has been so far, and it's good for you to understand that a few years ago, when I was on the military base within the city of Amsterdam, saw this Chinook landing. You ended up with the quote, "This could have gone differently." I was really fascinated by the idea. We're already thinking with the team of the city of Amsterdam about what drones could do in the city, and I was like, this is the great place to do this stuff. Why don't we start here? And this was the point in time when I was really getting curious about what drones could do for the city, how we could prepare ourselves for a future with drones in an urban setting. And then I went to the US, to California on a trade mission, innovation mission with the province of North Holland. And I got to see the VTOL developments, the Joby, the Archer, the Elroy Air. We visited their facilities. And then I was like, this is also the future of drones. This is also the future of innovative aviation. And the future is already here. It's not far-fetched idea. It's being built in the US, and I should bring in this thinking to Europe, to the little city of Amsterdam, and take that with me and include that in our approach.
I was on one of the same trade mission, also organized by Coast to Coast Foundation. Readers of our Substack will know I got to publish a little bit about that. We were there at Den Helder, and you're used to thinking of airports in terms of like, where's the runway? And Den Helder has a runway, but it also has 11 of these large helicopter takeoff and landing points, or TLOFs. And I felt like I was looking at the future there in the Netherlands, just like you felt like you were looking at the future in California. Are we going to need something like this at like all of the airports? Like if air taxi to the airport is going to end up being the mission, it seems, where are we going to find like patches of anyhow? All of these questions are questions that are sort of dancing around in my head right now. In your bio, we talked about, sort of helicopters and vertical as a kid, and then we talk about drones now. Was there a moment where you, or is it really more about the trade mission that you were on and getting to see the eVTOLs in California? Was that the moment, or was there something already before that?
It's a combination of moments in time that have really fueled my thinking. As a kid, working on the air traffic control software, running an airport. It was already my initial idea, but then when I came into contact with the drones in the city of Amsterdam, and especially the Chinook landing, it was like this should be done differently here. But I guess the visit to California all added up to the idea. And that was also for me the thinking we should look at this from an integrated perspective. It's not solely drones that will be flying in our airspace, whether it's low airspace or higher airspace. It will be in urban settings anyway. And we really should start organizing this in such a way that we allow room and space for that. We should also prepare ourselves not to be overwhelmed by it.
The Chinook is an overwhelmingly large helicopter, right? Like, this is one of these big two-bladed, like, do they carry something like 12 people? I mean, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but they are large. What was it doing in Amsterdam? Like, where are you in the city center? And like, where was it landing? Like, I can't even imagine.
Well, next time you're around, Kyle, you should see this. This is actually landing within the inner city of the city of Amsterdam. It's called the Navy Barracks, the Marine Terrain in Dutch. It's a military base that is slowly but surely allowing the city itself to put on buildings over there and to transform the area as a whole. The Navy and the military will stay there, but will have different space. But still, there is a helicopter pad. There is this H on the ground. There is this ground space that is defense space. And a number of times per year, this Chinook or another military helicopter does test runs or demonstration runs or practice runs by landing in inner city area, and Amsterdam is this place for it. And I've been having the fortunate situation to experience this landing a few times. It's overwhelming. It's magnificent. It's loud. It's noisy. There's a lot of wind effect to it. I was like, if this will continue in the next decades, and we'll also have drones, larger and small, be landing over there on this spot or other places. What do we need to do to prepare ourselves for that as a city?
Yeah, right. As a city, as you say, like we're kind of at this place as a society where we say under 500 feet, that's where drones go. Not airports, that's where drones go. Airplanes everywhere else, right? And sort of separation versus integration, yes, right? And
exactly.
I think that's only going to get us so far in what happens when the Chinook does need to land, or if an emergency hospital transfer needs to happen, or
exactly.
eVTOLs. I think you're asking the right question at a very, very interesting time. And I love what I got to see in Amsterdam about how you're approaching it. So tell me about Urban Skylab. Like, for one thing...
So the whole project started off by the colleagues and I doing use cases, do some policy exploration and some drone detection and public perception research projects to understand, the impact of drones on our city. At the same time, it's quite easy then to talk about drones flying in the air, but they need to land and take off somewhere as well. And one of the first ideas that came to mind by me was we should also include city planners and urban planners, architects into our projects and our thinking, because if we would look at the ground infrastructure and ground facilities, they will have a say in that as well. And they need to be activated as well, slowly but surely. And from this thinking, Urban Skylab as a project was founded. It was in a way founded by me and some other people within the city of Amsterdam that were also part of the team, and Arcam Institute, which is an architectural center in Amsterdam. Well, we did a design sprint for 3 days, and one of the participants was Fabrications. It's an architectural firm led by, among others, Eric Freiters. And Eric and I continued our conversations after this design sprint and said to each other, we want to do more with this project. There's more to be done than only thinking and doing in 3 days. So we set up Urban Skylab as a dedicated project team run by Kennedy Approach and Fabrications. Part of our group at that point in time were the several provinces and the ministries as well. We visited them. We talked about Urban Skylab as a concept, as a research facility, and they said we want to be part of that. We're going to be sponsors of that. So we had the 3 provinces, North Holland, South Holland and Flevoland, the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water, the Stimulation Fund for Creative Industries, put together funding to run a 8-month research in which the question was, how do we do spatial planning for drones and other forms of innovative aviation in urban setting? So in the Netherlands, but it could also be other urban areas in the world. That was the research question, and that's what we started our work.
So maybe we could show the audience a little bit about this. Like I do this somewhat hesitantly. Some people only listen, so we'll have to sort of describe what we're looking at as we go. But I wonder if you've got any visuals that help people understand what came out of that design sprint and sort of the three-dimensional nature of this.
So what you see here is a typology of a city in the Netherlands. It's a real city, but to a certain extent, we made a real interface out of it based on a typology of a harbor area in Rotterdam, the city of Rotterdam. And it shows the waterways, and it shows also the room and the space that is there for various kind of applications. And what we see here is different colors. So we see, for example, good logistics, flying with eVTOL facilities. Next to the water, we see in purple a VTOL landing space on a big building in the north. We see green lines of agricultural and inspection drones doing their work in the harbor area. And we see, for example, Crisscross medical drone facilities running their programs, bring in medication and other medical-related logistics to people at home or to those facilities. And they fly crisscross. You see patterns for some applications, but there's also this medical drone that can go everywhere, anytime. And I think it's a nice interpretation of if you do spatial integration, you have to look at various angles of drones and even innovative aviation to do this properly. And what we try to do is bring everything together in this research.
Yep, this is great. And for listeners who can't see, think of like the Google Maps view where you're sort of in 3D mode and you're kind of seeing it aerial view, not necessarily straight on. And this version is more schematic, less the satellite photo. And of course, we're looking at a city in the Netherlands, so there are canals, right? And the waterways are very important. There's a big waterway going through the center of it, and we've got ships on that. As we just described, we've got sort of this purple area where it looks like a helicopter, you said VTOL, can land on a larger building. And then to the right of that canal, that waterway, we've got these yellow conical shapes. I wonder, is this the goods shipment? So this is EVT or drones bringing goods in?
There will be cargo drones or eVTOL, bigger systems and smaller systems that bring in goods from other areas of the harbor, from ships, or it could be the things that have been dropped by ships over there find their way to other areas, urban areas in the city. This is the fresh area of the Rotterdam harbor, so there's fresh produce being brought in from abroad. And it can be distributed quite easily to other areas of the bigger metropolitan area of Rotterdam.
This has really helped me understand the depth, right? And certain things are marked 800 meters and 120 meters. And when we were in person with the architectural model, the maquette there, like, of course, it was much more visual. Like you can just tell through the wonders of stereoscopic vision that this is higher than that, because all of this was modeled out in 3D instead of this 2D version that viewers can see and our listeners cannot. And I think what this helped me see at the time is that, like you said, there are patterns, but then there are other things which are sort of crisscrossed in and out, right? So yeah, this is fantastic. This really helped me understand. Thank you. Yeah.
Can I add one thing to it? You see the blue elements in the visual. The blue is entertainment and training. We believe it's also important to allow especially little drone systems to put on shows for people. For example, end of year, we have fireworks in the Netherlands. It's not good for people's health, all those fireworks going of in the airspace. And we believe drones could really be a environmental friendly version. So we also plotted various areas where drone shows could be put up for special occasions, and also training center for youngsters that want to become a drone pilot or want to do gamification with drones. We have this background, of course, with flying flight models, as a youngster. But we believe drones could be the future fun aspect as well. And then we should also design areas in our environment where people and youngsters can freely explore and experiment with flying with drones.
Yeah, that's very interesting. There's a podcast that I follow, which is these air traffic controllers in the States. It's called Opposing Bases. It's really, really great. I'll drop a link to it in the show notes. One of the recurring themes in Opposing Bases is that there are certain areas of the airspace in the States that feel like they're not funded correctly to continue to support training activities, right? How are pilots going to be trained if they can't do practice runs? So I love that you've included that, right? Not only the entertainment aspect, but the training aspect. You think about what China's doing with drone displays for, things like celebrations and 4th of July or other celebrations that involve fireworks. Yeah, I love this. So you're sort of thinking of everything. Now, this seems like it's intentionally modeling a very busy day. There's training and there's celebration and there's medical and there's cargo. But one imagines that it won't be too far into the future before this might be somewhat normal busy day, not sort of a once in a decade, but once in a month kind of busy day. Do you have any sort of sense of timeline around that?
Well, it's hard to understand what the future will be like and which business models or business cases speed up earlier than others, or even find the market. But we believe that the applications that we see here on this visual will indeed be the applications that we will be seeing in urban settings. So just to get it straight, good logistics urgent logistics for various participants, including medical, we definitely believe that will be there. The entertainment industry, it will be there. The VTOL and passenger traffic, it will be there. Inspection, it will be there. So those 5 typologies that you see in this picture, we all believe it will be there. The question is, do we have sufficient airspace to cover this all at the same time, at the same location? And we believe that is one of the learnings of our project. We'll see that some of the useful applications will see daylight earlier than others, or will be prioritized in the airspace. We cannot cover this all at the same time. So we believe public services, including medical services, will probably be prioritized in lower airspace in urban settings. They will go first, and the rest will need to follow. That's one of our insights that we believe is feasible.
On the flight home, I did a bunch of research, what's happening in Toronto, where I live, what drone applications are happening here. And it turned out that there is already sort of a medical corridor where there's a drone that's flying back and forth between 2 hospitals, sort of in the southwestern burbs to the northwestern burbs. So not crossing the downtown yet, but still crossing quite a few highways and a lot of, dense residential and dense commercial areas. I think you're right to include medical. I think the cargo drones totally make sense as well. And of course, inspection. That's the other thing that's already happening. Pipeline inspections and windmills and bridge inspections and these kinds of things. When you're working with municipality stakeholders, what sorts of concerns do they bring that might be different, that we might not be thinking of?
Well, what this visual doesn't show, of course, is the impact of all those applications and systems running in the air with regards to sound nuisance, wind flows of bigger systems that all of a sudden land multiple times a day on a rooftop or near a residential area. So this is a big concern also in our project. We try to find and understand what kind of distance we should take into account of those systems running in this urban setting. What distance should we take into account flying from buildings, flying from park settings? And it's really hard. There's no scientific proof yet of what distance we should apply here, because it's all based on bigger systems like general aviation, Boeing 747s. We know a lot about nuisance levels of those systems, but we hardly have any idea or clue what these kind of new systems will do in our in an urban setting. And this is a big concern. It's privacy, of course, with the drones that have cameras that will also fly over our back gardens, around our workspaces. How should we deal with privacy and law about this? It's, of course, the sound nuisance that could potentially be there. It's wind effects that we should take into account, and of course also safety from flying close to people, to the ground risk that is there. And these are all concerns of all of those municipalities and cities that are also part of our project. At the same time, they're also curious to understand what we believe is feasible to do. And what you see here on this same visual is this purple-colored VTOL landing approach on a big building. What we identified, it is in the Netherlands at least, it's not feasible to think that we can land a VTOL system on each and every residential area or something. We believe it's only perhaps 1 or 2 spots in the smaller cities that we have in the Netherlands that really allow enough space and distance from people that live there, work there, because it's too much of big of a system to really allow it to land and take off in our small cities. This situation is, of course, totally different than perhaps the US cities or even the Asian cities. I know, for example, that all big high-rises in Tokyo have helicopter pads on top of them. They were there for a specific reason of earthquakes and be able to really bring away people in urgent situations from those buildings on the top. So Tokyo, for example, seems to be much better equipped from an architectural point of view, that all the roofs have helicopter of those big high-rises. We don't have this situation in the Netherlands. We don't have the designs of our buildings are not have not been the roofs have not been taken into account to do something with it, and we now slowly but surely start to think about that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know in the States and in Canada, it's very common. And in fact, and there may be regulations that say all tall buildings must have helipads, in order to facilitate emergency medical and things like that. But one of the things that you find with all these regulatory compliance helipads is that they're somewhat disused. They aren't necessarily maintained. They aren't necessarily free from obstacles or detritus that might, get caught up in the wind. And so they're there, but they might take some investment to get to the point where they'd be more usable. At least the minimums are there, right? It's been set up so that you know that you could land that amount of weight on the roof, for instance. The age of architecture in Amsterdam is a little bit older than it is in most U.S. cities, which is wonderful and beautiful to visit. But they probably weren't. They were thinking about how to hoist cargo up into the top story of the building, not how to land a helicopter on it. So.
No, and the funny thing is that those rooftops, that's one of the other insights that we have, are on an ideal height at least, to really say, okay, if we really want to run operations with drones and other forms of innovative aviation in urban settings, we believe we should not use the ground space too much. We may prefer to use the rooftops of those big distribution centers, hospital roofs, and other big buildings to stay away from the noise, stay away from the downwash of wind, sound, and everything. So we should start preparing ourselves, and that's also the vision of fabrications, to really start designing new types of buildings from the ground up. Start thinking about how we use the roof for drones or for VTOLs.
In the last image, we were kind of seeing, like we talked about, a busy day with an eVTOL here and, maybe a helicopter there and drones over here, constantly moving, and drones moving not unpredictably, but at least not necessarily between the same 2 locations with the medical delivery. How do you imagine all this working? Like in road traffic, we have lanes, and air traffic, there's often sort of corridors. Like how do you imagine this working inside of a city?
Well, what we did in our research is to understand what kind of traffic zones will we have in our lower airspace. And one of the things that we explored is by looking at the urban fabric of a city, you naturally find space for drones and eVTOLs, for example, in the open spaces that are out there already in the city, which is rivers, parks, roadways. On top of those, above those, there's sufficient space to do stuff. But then, of course, the question is, will we use the urban fabric to fly? How do we have larger volumes of drones and eVTOLs flying together? Will they fly crisscross in our city from A to B in the shortest way possible? And will the digital systems that we will be having do the detect and avoid of those systems? Because the systems should not collide, of course, and there is all kind of software development going on in which those systems can avoid each other. The question is that most effective way to use our airspace? Because if all the systems have to stop continuously for other traffic and have to decide who goes first, it may be much more inefficient than, for example, if you use a bundled flying system, which you of course know from traffic. We are used to traffic on our roads. We are used to traffic lights, people passing streets in a way that's been organized, that is being prioritized in a way that road traffic runs smoothly. If we copy this to the air, we see the bundled flying situation, different lanes in which different applications can fly in the same direction for the same application or with the same speed. It depends on what kind of application you give to this corridor. Bundled flying is an option to really manage the traffic in the air. And of course, there's this hybrid way of thinking in which you will have corridors and crisscross flying combined in, for example, different layers of our airspace. This is the way we have been thinking and also have been testing our urban fabric. What is feasible?
Yeah, I love this. For listeners, when Vries is talking about crisscross flying, it sort of looks like a very long straight pasta, like a spaghetti or a fettuccine, but still dry in the pot, right? So everything's sort of crisscrossed around and everything's sort of crossing at irregular angles. And I could imagine it working, right? And then in the bundled flying, it's much more like a ribbon, a series of lines where everything's following, which very much feels more like the way roads work today or the way that airspace works today, where things are flying definitely between structured points so that you kind of know where they're going to be. And of course, hybrid is a mixture of the two. Of course, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, canals, yes, waterways, right? And roads also give you a lot of vertical separation, right? Obviously, there's lots of room above the cars. But one thing that I've read or I've heard about in drone regulation in the States, and probably Canada too, is that there's a little bit of a worry that if a drone did come down over a highway, it's not so much that the drone would damage the car or anything, or the car would obviously damage the drone, but that's okay. There's nobody in it. It's more that if someone started to brake because they saw this drone falling out of the sky, you could create really dangerous situations in traffic. And so, there's a regulatory concern there around making sure that, the drones are safe enough. But I'm almost jealous of your canals now, right? Because we have all these roads in North America, lots and lots and lots of roads. But I'm not confident that, especially on faster highways, we're going to be able to use them. Maybe slower city streets. Maybe it won't be so bad, right? If a drone falls on a car at 40 kilometers an hour, it's not going to be as big of a deal.
I want you to understand that if we are going to see drones or eVTOLs flying, if potentially they would be flying over our roadways, highways, motorways across our nations, it will probably be bigger systems that have a big battery capacity and that can fly from one city to another to bring something over there that should be brought over there. But these bigger systems will also have parachutes or other ways to prevent them from coming down on our roads directly. The small recreational drones that may come down now directly because they don't have a parachute. Those smaller systems, 249 grams, can also create damage and collisions and a lot of nasty situations on our big national highways. But it won't be normal to see them over there. That will be the bigger systems that have other things to make sure that they land softly or safely, not on our roads, but then besides them, for example.
Seems like rail also.
Exactly.
Right. I think and rail is a much more controlled environment. And again, if a 249-gram drone landed on a freight train, it's going to be fine.
So what we discovered is that in our lower airspace, in our urban fabric, it would be feasible to think that bundled flying is the most efficient way, the most safe way, but also from a public acceptance point of view. If we see drones flying at certain bundles, certain corridors in our airspace, we can sooner or later get used to it. If we see drones fly crisscross over a city, you never know when to expect one or a bunch of them because they come and go like they want. We believe that the nuisance level and the acceptance level will be very low, and we need the citizens to really adopt them as well. Because if they start complaining, the business case won't work because the municipalities have to act. So we believe at a lower airspace in urban fabric, bundled flying is the way forward. But we of course need exemptions for higher altitudes for use cases and applications that can fly directly, including medical drone. Like a trauma helicopter now also flies from A to B, and other traffic in the air will need to segregate themselves from this urgent flight. So the left, we believe, is the situation on a much higher level or in the more rural areas of the Netherlands when there is no controlled airspace, when there's not too much traffic. All the traffic that is there can safely but surely detect and avoid with systems fly crisscross, lower airspace, bundle. And on the right, it could be that we have a little bit higher airspace and we can create this combination.
So Vries, you've talked about different kinds of traffic. We've talked about routing them differently, point to point versus bundled. What about the actual different kinds of aircraft? Like what's the research you've done there?
Well, when you want to do a spatial integration of drones and other forms of innovative aviation, you need to, of course, know about the natural character of the various systems that are there, the amount of battery capacity that they have, the amount of payload that they can carry. Otherwise, it's very hard to say how to spatially integrate it. And it's more or less of a child's picture flying from A to B and you don't get into the details. What we wanted to do is really have a good feeling of what is feasible in our lower airspace. So we researched the various systems that are already on the market. Of course, the quadcopters are quite heavy on the market already, including the fixed wing drones. So the drones that have a wing and can fly and float in the airspace, but they can also land vertically in most cases. So the quadcopter and fixed wing are the drone systems that are being operated from a distance. We looked into the 5 bigger systems that are already on the market and compared their specifications and used the average of those specifications to get an understanding of what a quadcopter could do in the airspace, what its behavior will be in terms of flying, but also how far can it get, what does it require to be recharged, how many space does it require to land, on the ground, and what kind of noise or airflow buffers should be taken into account with those top 5 systems in general. So we identified the quadcopter, the fixed wing, the eVTOL, which is in the Netherlands and in Europe not on the market yet. We see, of course, Joby in the US, Archer, and other systems that are being test run and in certification right now. And on the other side of the globe, we have, of course, the Asian parties and Middle East. The US systems are being run over there. There's Chinese systems that fly in Shenzhen, for example. We took the 5 biggest systems that will be on the market in the near future, and we made also a comparison of their specification and brought it into one eVTOL generic specification that you see here. What kind of FATO does it require to fly and to land in an urban setting? How far can it fly? What kind of noise and airflow buffers are there that also require from us to fly on a bigger distance, for example, from buildings than a quadcopter or a fixed wing drone because of the noise index. Well, and then of course we have this eSTOL, so the short takeoff and landing, this airplanes that require a shorter runway, and we have the electronic, that's of course what your podcast is all about, the conventional takeoff and landing airplanes that also require a certain runway, that have a certain battery capacity that we can use in our research. And we took those 5 systems into our research, and that's what we did. What you see is we combine those systems also with their applications we believe are feasible because they have a use. All these systems either run cargo, they do inspections, or they transfer people.
It seems like these different aircraft might also have different altitude characteristics. I would expect a quadcopter mostly to be operating lower. for instance, than the fixed wing, and eVTOL, probably higher, but again, eVTOL will probably be lower than eCTOL, for instance. So there's sort of a banding in the third dimension that we see. But I love how you're thinking through different landing types and dimensions. Like obviously the urban footprint is going to be different, not only from noise characteristics, but from the amount of land it's going to use or building roof space it's going to use. Cool. So when looking at the graphic, for listeners, it's sort of a chart, and you've got landing and takeoff, you've got landing type, landing dimensions, and noise and airflow buffers. And then we've got quadcopter, fixed wing, eVTOL, ESTOL, and CTOL. There's also the vertical slope. You've got in each one, like plus 7.1 glide, it was 7.5 glide. Tell us about that. I assume this is sort of the steepness with which they can come down to a landing, but walk us through that visual there.
Well, what you see here, it shows the behavior of the aircraft in the city. So the quadcopter doesn't require much horizontal space because it's born and being built to really do vertical activity or horizontal activity on a higher level. But it, as you can see, it doesn't go very far. It's not being built to fly on a longer distance, where a fixed wing drone can easily go vertically to above and then fly a horizontal for a vast amount of kilometers, 20, 30 kilometers. It's easy. They can even go up to 100 kilometers, as you have been seeing in Den Helder, for example. And this visual that you see here shows the behavior of the system in the airspace. And this is also what we took into account. When we want to fly in eVTOL, it should bring in people or goods from another city, probably to a next city or a next situation. It flies horizontally most of the time at a certain high airspace level. But if it lands, it needs this glide path as well, and it may conflict with other kinds of traffic that is there. So we should have the proper segregation over there. So this was for us a playing field of understanding what the system requires, but also what it can do for applications, inspection, good logistics, or people logistics, and what we can expect from the system.
Speeds and altitudes and all of this is going to definitely impact like what should be the bundled laneways, right? On some level.
Exactly.
Not just what space do we have? Is it rail? Is it road? Is it canal? Is it water? Is it what? But also, yeah, I think really interesting.
Yeah, and this is also important for us to also inform our audiences. I mean, we are not reaching out to those people that are already active in the drone or in other aviation already. They know this figure themselves, and they may even have better numbers to it at a certain level. What we wanted to do is educate people around us, policymakers, city planners, that they should really start preparing themselves for these kind of systems with the applications that we used with them, to really start thinking, because that's also a big important thing for our research. We see that there's not too many people still eager to think about this because they don't know where to start. And our research is also a conversation starter for a lot of audiences that we saw it in the traffic, the conference, but also in the future discussions that we'll be having, because the physical presentation will also do a travel in the country. It will be at the various province houses and the ministry as a conversation starter.
Okay, Vries, let's say a city has, for instance, Joby coming in. They're probably a likely candidate. So at first, maybe they're only going to be in one or two segregated spaces. We've heard about them going into Dubai, but let's say they want to start expanding, right? How should a city go about thinking where in the city it's safe to let them expand? How should they answer that?
Well, what we did in our research is that we researched 3 typologies in the Netherlands, typical areas that we could see these kind of operations come into the airspace sooner or later. These are a harbor setting, an airport setting, and an urban setting. The funny thing is that we expected to see a lot of difference between those typologies, but there are some generic findings here, and I think they also relate to your question. What if a Joby-like aviation company wants to run, or an Uber wants to run a VTOL service in the Netherlands or in one of the US cities? What we discovered is that each typology, but also each city, has a different urban fabric that should be taken into account for VTOL experiences. And we have a lot of rivers and water in the Netherlands. Rotterdam, Amsterdam, even other cities in the Netherlands have rivers. We believe that those rivers are ideal fabrics to be used for VTOL flight patterns. We believe that if Joby would want to really raise the bar and start up flights in cities, they would want to follow waterways, railways, or roadways as a means to really follow the urban fabric in a natural way. The roadways also allow recharging VTOLs, for example, by using the fuel stations that could be also transformed into various power and fuel technologies, but also electric charging facilities. The same goes, of course, for train tracks that also naturally have energy supply over there already. So we believe those existing road facilities, railway, water facilities are ideal because there's space, there's a charging facility, or there's an escape facility if you need to come down at certain point in time to drop people or to refuel or for emergency situations. Another thing is that we believe VTOLs can also easily be incorporated into airports. We researched Lelystad Airport, which is one of our regional airports in the Netherlands, and we discovered that there's room to really run a VTOL operation in the same circuits as general aviation, or use special VTOL circuits in the lower airspace parallel to existing circuits that are there for general aviation. That's for starters. We also see that when you want to cross a existing corridor for general aviation, you want to cross it 90 degrees as much as possible, because when you cross an existing circuit with a VTOL, the risk of collision is limited to a maximum extent if you cross 90 degrees, because you will go past it fast enough rather than fly in the same direction with multiple systems that could collide halfway or further on in the process of this flight. So cross 90 degrees, use the corridor, the circuit system that is there on airports, and use existing hubs for people and goods. So train stations, distribution centers, and airports, of course, as hubs for people and goods, also as a base for VTOL applications. And then the one concrete situation that is ideal is, of course, the parking lots that the bigger conference centers, airports have parking lots for cars. And the rooftops of those parking lots could be ideal places to also have VTOL land or take off.
Right. And potentially charging as
Exactly.
well, to your point.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Especially if a parking lot is already sort of outfitting itself for charging. I could see that being really easy. We've got a graphic of Lelystad Airport. And to your point about the 90 degrees, are you saying that eVTOL traffic should, if this airport, you can see is sort of oriented like northeast, are you saying that like they should not fly in the same direction as the general aviation, but sort of fly across it? Is that what you're saying with that? Or maybe, okay.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because then you can, because they have a different speed, obviously, than, let's say, general aviation.
I see.
And you
Right.
want to have the same speed in the same circuit. And we believe that VTOLs will have a different application than general aviation has. So should also go to other areas and have other takeoff. They need to fly to other cities. They will probably. And therefore, it's natural to think that you can really fly out to the northwest or southeast as flying in or fly out.
So, okay, so to your point, we should imagine sort of, traffic that's moving at like maybe 150 knots or something like this, coming in northeast in order to make an approach at this runway, or the other direction depending on the wind.
Yeah.
And so, if in our eVTOL, it's going to be coming in at a completely different speed and in a different pattern. So having its approach from the other way makes a lot of sense. Got it. And at a different altitude as well.
One thing, and this of course is the typology, ladies, at airport. So we did a collision test with it. Okay, what if we're going to have drones and eVTOLs be using this airport? How could it work? And at the right side of ladies at airport, there's this general aviation area where there's also training centers, there's maintenance and repair. And we believe a VTOL landing zone could ideally place at that side of the airport, rather than on the left side where there's the takeoff and landing. This airport will be having also fighter jets coming up in the future. The military has designated this as a military airport now. The government decided we need F-35 fighter jets also use this airport. So it will be an interesting mix. So what we try to do in our research is design and plot where could we have VTOL elements in there, but also drones. And I'm going to raise the bar here as well for your listeners. To what extent is it dangerous to have drones flying on airports like this airport here? And VTOLs, of course. How do we bring everything together? Because the experience is there with having airplanes in the air, bigger and small. They have air traffic control. They have maintenance and repair. They have charging facilities right now, also for electric flights. They have agriculture around it. You can see a lot of agricultural feeds. I said to the airport, maybe it's feasible to think that we also bring services to agriculture.
Solar also can use drones in order to inspect panels and things like that.
Yeah.
Lots of. And to your point, I mean, I think the safety question today is, well, you don't want it being ingested in the engine of a 737 or Airbus 320 as it lands. But you can also see lots of reasons that you would want to start. So how do we make it safe, I guess?
Exactly.
Yeah. Interesting. Vries, this has been great. Thank you so much. We've taken a lot of your time today. So we've heard a lot today about the future of air mobility. What do you think holds the most promise?
I think drones is the biggest promise, because they are small, they are versatile, they can do inspections, they can be used by governments, and they can be helpful. And we believe that the sentiment in the Netherlands, and I think I understand, is that a VTOL can only carry 2 or 3 people or a little bit more. It's hard to bring in the societal value of this in a country that is densely populated, that has limited ground space. So I believe drones are the accelerator for other ways of innovative aviation. And if we don't find the way to get used to drones first, it's hard to get used to other systems as well.
Any lessons that you've learned? Anything that you set out and thought, like, certainly this is true, and learned later, like, nope, that's not true at all? Like, what lessons have you learned as part of this?
The importance to really look at an urban fabric in such a detailed way that you can really do it properly. I thought it would be easy to bring in generic findings, but what we discovered, Fabrications and I, it's still complex. We are not done yet. We thought we could easily do the spatial integrations with the things that we know already, but we don't know everything yet, because what about privacy, noise, sound, downwash effects, wind effects? All those aspects are still gray for everybody. And we definitely need to make a move on that as a society first in order to understand the implication of everything.
Something you're most proud of?
That we did, that we were able to really do this project. I think we are one of the first in the world to go to this amount of detail, to look at this topic from a ground perspective rather than an air perspective, and be able to find partners that were curious to work with us for a few months to really do this work together. And by having governments and institutions working with us, I think it's the best approach. I'm not here to fuel commercial applications. I'm here to bring in a soft landing to this topic. And I'm really proud of that we were able to do this. And I think there's still much work to do.
It goes back to that Chinook. There must be a better way.
Yeah.
Okay, we're to the lightning round, which is sort of a few very quick questions. What is your favorite airport?
JFK.
Okay, Kennedy Control, of course.
Kennedy. No, I think I really like the Dutch airport, and I think the Helder airport is really special to me. I think it's the same for you, Kyle, because it shows us the future in a way. But having a lot of history over there, it's so fun to see the history and the future in such a location.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Favorite aircraft?
Fokker Friendship.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay. And one last question before I let you go. What's giving you joy right now?
Talking with people about this topic. There's so much fun in our work and what's happening in our airspace and what could be potentially happening. It's so fun to be one of the first to really work in this and start to thinking and having the conversations with each other. Like this, Kyle, is for me the best energy.
Vries, thank you so much for joining us today on the SkyZero.io podcast.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you for having me.